talk, everybody. I'm very pleased to introduce our next panel discussion on innovation and technology. I'm also equally pleased that this is going to be facilitated by Craig Douglas from TPA. So I'm going to hand off to Craig. So welcome.
Well, so it wasn't the first time you heard from me today, but thanks everybody for sticking around. We know that the Friday afternoon on the hottest day of the year has sort of thinned the crowd a little, but we saved the best for last. So I appreciate everybody sticking around. We're really excited today to talk about technology and how that feeds sort of new ways of thinking about the way we deliver services. So when we talk about launching from common ground, we have sort of policy discussion and ways that we can sort of organize our system to integrate care. And now we want to sort of bend the curve a little bit and think about how can we look and think about services different? Is it just delivering service with a human being? Is it just providing supports in a home? Are there other ways we can look at the way we serve people who live with intellectual disabilities and autism? So I will just kind of keep things moving, but I want to introduce my colleagues here. So we'll start with Greg, and we'll dive into some questions.
It's great to be back here. My name is Greg Willems. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Keystone Human Services. I think I first presented here on technology in 2011, probably back when I was in Colorado. So it's great to be back and talk with all of you again.
Hi, I'm Brian Hart. I run an agency in Cincinnati, Ohio called LAD, and we run a program called Smart Living, which I oversee. I've spearheaded, been going for about 4 years now, where we have developed a technology-first model of service that really looks at how do we provide technology as if we were in the home, not just as an add-on, and seeing some pretty awesome successes out of that project. So excited to be here and share what I know with you guys.
I'm not going to introduce myself again. Good afternoon. Thank you to those that decided to stick around and hear some more discussion around technology. With that, I do want to just acknowledge Patrick's leadership and his staff in this space. He has done a really tremendous job helping us at the statewide level think through technology solutions. He has chaired a technology task force work group for the last several years, and continues to, I think, challenge. Patrick, I think you continue to challenge your membership, so appreciate that.
Similarly, I will not go through the trouble of introducing myself, because if you don't know by the fourth session of the day, perhaps we have a different problem. But similarly to Jeremy, I also want to recognize Marion Tresky, who is one of our other chairs for one of our tech task force work groups. And Marion, of course, has been a steadfast champion in, helping individuals and families really understand how they can embed technology in their lives and in their homes, and then certainly the translation of policy to supports coordination and to providers. So seeing all of that process through. Thank you, Marion, for your leadership and your commitment.
All right. Well, so Jeremy mentioned some of the work that's been going on at the Technology Task Force, and where we wanted to sort of get started is we put out this survey, ODP put out this survey several weeks ago, and one of the common themes that we learned from that is people are really sort of struggling with what this is. How do I break into this traffic circle? How do we get started in this space? So we thought we'd start by just asking our expert panel, sort of what are one or two barriers that you see right now that are preventing technology from getting into our space, that are preventing some of these innovations?
I'll go ahead and start. And I'm a guest of Pennsylvania, so I'm going to speak with the expertise that I have from the state of Ohio and a few other states that I work with. And what we find, the largest barrier is nobody knows where to start. You think about all the different things as an agency that you have to deal with every single day. And then for someone to come to you and say, we want you to use technology more. Like, what does that even mean? We just had a discussion before us about all the different massive systems that sometimes work together, sometimes don't. That's just to keep records and keep connection with each other. And then you think about how do you provide service then using technology? Because we have gotten really good over the last 50 years since really closing institutions on providing services with people. And it's a massive change. So how do you change and make that shift? And so that I think is the biggest barrier. When it's so daunting, you don't know where to start. There are millions of pieces of technology. And one of the things that we found through our work is that there is a solution for almost every itemized thing that a DSP does in their day in and day out work. But how do you make them work together? How do you find the right one? And how do you make sure that when you buy technology, it's not a VCR 2 weeks later? Those are the things that I think are out there. That's the barrier. Do you want us to go into solutions or just talk about barriers?
Have
Okay,
at it.
keep going. Okay, so when I think about that, the question is, okay, what do we do with it? Because I can tell you that that's where I was about 4 years ago when I decided to really get into this work and figure out how do we use it. We didn't know where to begin. And the biggest thing is start small and start asking those around you. There are people that have been doing this much longer than I have and you have and anyone else here. And there is expertise out there. Also, it's not as hard as it seems that it could be. If you think about your own home, or you think about what you're holding in your pocket or wearing on your wrist, those technologies are no different than what we use every single day to provide technology-enabled support. Out of the technology we buy, I would say probably more than 90% of it, if not higher, is from Amazon, Best Buy, Home Depot, wherever. There are very few things that are built specifically for the DD population. Almost none, actually. When there is something specific we use for the caregiving, it's usually built for aging, and then we retrofit it back to people with disabilities. So that would be the thing. If that's going to be your biggest barrier. And I would say, take that barrier off the table and seek out assistance and seek out expertise that exists. There's people up here, there's people everywhere who are ready to help you.
So speaking from Pennsylvania, I want to acknowledge the work that's gone on in the last 5 years by ODP and their group. 5 years ago, we had a conversation about implementing remote supports. We had Ron Molesky on there. We had the licensing department. We had everybody in there talking about process and how do we implement this and make it sure that it's safe, effective, and we're using it appropriately, and we have their guidance. We transitioned 5 years forward. We have systems in place. We have processes in place. We have it in the waiver. We have task force led by administrative entities and SCOs and the state that are really breaking down most of the perceived barriers that are still out there. We put in throughout Keystone, we have remote supports or remote supporting technology, enabling technology in over 120 homes, both in CLA, supported living, life sharing. We put it everywhere. Over the last 3 years, those conversations with SCOs and administrative entities, the challenge has gone away from a systems perspective. And I just want to acknowledge the great work that's gone on over the last 5 years to get us to this point through the technology task force, through conversations, through provider-led initiatives. So well done there. As far as some of the barriers that I continue to see, we're busy right now, and I think it's a capacity issue for providers. There's the challenges you all face. You look at kind of the initiatives that have rolled out over the last several years. The technology perspective is this is one more thing to do. Where do I develop the capacity to do that? Now, that said, what Brian pointed out is your DSPs are probably one of your greatest resources to adopting technology if you can challenge them to what here we call it within Keystone of developing a culture of curiosity. How do you get and create some bandwidth at the service level? We can talk about, we'll get into this a little bit later about how you organizationally can maybe think about this initiative, but maybe just think this out of challenge of how do you work with the DSP on that base level to get them to try some things, to put in some initiatives. I know Craig is doing that and with his current organization at the ARC. So it's that. There's also a change management element to this, and change management teaches us that you kind of have to develop a few champions within your organization. How do you find that champion? How do you find that success case? How do you build upon that? Whether that's, having a conversation with individuals, and whether it's having a conversation with DSPs and getting them to help develop that organizational momentum and behavioral momentum to kind of implement some solutions. So there is management processes that have to be in place to support it. We'll get into that a little bit later, but from a barrier standpoint, I think the barriers are not systems anymore. The one exception right now is there's not incentives built in to adopt technology. So you might adopt it, and since our current payment system is based upon a supporting kind of element, you can have a negative consequence sometimes in funding. It's happened to me. It's happened at Keystone, but it's very irregular. And I think as we move to selective contracting and they're looking at the initiatives, those barriers will soon be out of the way, that can create some incentives for providers to adopt technology.
Thank you for your words, Greg. It does feel like over the last 5 years, we've made some progress, but just recognizing how much more work there is to do. On the topic of barriers, right, I think we have made some progress related to our service structure. I think that this is a crowded space, especially because we're not talking about a space that's dedicated specifically for people with disabilities, which is a good thing. But we have there are clearinghouses out online that you could find that just identify the amount of applications that are out there, and it is mind-numbing. Some applications look the same but actually do different things, and some look quite different but actually are doing very similar things. So, I think it is finding those champions, those people that are familiar, are working in that space, and bringing them in as much as you can. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll, just chime in, and this is probably something that everyone has heard me talk about a lot before. But I think we continue to just experience the barrier of a lack of exposure, right, to the options and to, more than just words on a paper, what remote supports can do, what assistive technology can do, but kind of meeting individuals and families where they're at in terms of, helping them to understand all of the things and demonstrating all of the things that technology could enable them to be able to do, more independently, more safely, for example, and, helping them to kind of understand the additional safety, right, that is kind of comes along with, like you said, sort of the everyday things that we're using, watches, phones, all of these things that help us stay connected, really help people stay safer in their communities and in their homes. And so, I think from an operational perspective, and having had many opportunities to, interact with individuals and families over the last year, it continues to be the challenge of just helping people to see it, right? See it in real life and do some demonstration. Mark Friedman, I'm sure that it's a name that is familiar to everyone. He's done this kind of cool project where he just went out and bought a whole bunch of the Amazon Alexas and sent them out to people that he knows. And part of his sort of study that he's doing is collecting information back on, what does this thing help you do, right? And so just giving people that opportunity, and for us to learn from them what they have kind of taught the thing to do to help them. And so that's also been something that's been super cool to kind of break down, that barrier on people just having limited exposure to these items.
I thought of one more. The other barrier that we find a lot is buy-in from the user, the individual we support, but also the family. You're going to get your buy-in from your DSP eventually. The biggest thing that they're afraid of is that you're going to replace them with a robot. And we tell them all the time, like, if there was a robot that could do your job, of course we would buy as many as we possibly could. And then you would do something even more valuable. But when you really have your DSP sit down and have them track out, what are they actually doing throughout the day? We spent 6 months value stream mapping our staff. They hated me at the end of it. We had them track every single thing they did for 15 minutes for 6 months. And we found that they are waiting around for things to happen ad nauseum. But they were doing other things that were around the house they didn't need to do. And as we started pulling that away and saying, we want you to be more valuable. We don't want to get rid of you, but we don't want you to be less bored. We want you to be more engaged. That's your DSP buy. When we work with the families, they're all afraid something's going to happen, right? That's why we have people there in case something happens. And as it turns out, technology can alert and monitor and support in those type of situations far better than an individual in the home can be. You think about one staff person in a home that has 4 people living in it can be one place at one time. And if that staff person happens to be in a sleep staff, they're not doing anything at all. We can just call that what it is. But showing that there is true value. A lot of times it's getting technology in and having it work while staff are still there and documenting. We like to do that. We go for a couple of weeks and then we print out reports. Here's all the stuff the in-person staff did not do, should have done, should have caught, did not see, did not catch. They're clearly better at what they do with the technology. And then we can use the staff somewhere else, getting that buy-in and then connecting people with each other. We have years now of parents who understand what it looks like and are welcome to talk with people, individuals who love it and want to talk with their people. That's the thing. So that is a barrier to be aware of. You will never be able to educate parents enough to make them feel good about it until they actually do it. And the second something goes wrong and someone falls and breaks their arm, they're going to say, see, technology didn't work. And you have to explain to them, well, technology doesn't carry people around in a basket, so they're going to break their arm. But that's another big barrier that I think we forget to identify and call out when you're starting down this road.
I'll add just one thing based on my recent experience. One of the things that if you look at it from a person-centered perspective, we were just I've been spending a lot of time with our self-advocates, and most people, when you ask them, are they using technology? I would say 70 to 75% would raise their hand and say, yeah, they have a watch, or they reach their friends on their cell phone, or they use FaceTime, or they use technology in some way. But when you ask them about how they use it for service, they say, we're not allowed to do that. We have to have staff with us. We've trained our person served in this system of care really well to expect that they have to have human beings with them. So part of the work not only is trying to avoid sort of the shiny object syndrome with all the fancy gadgets and the thousands of applications that are out there that can be sold, but it's also building confidence with the people that we support. And that takes, just like any other relationship, it takes time to teach people that, what we told you about having staff with you all the time can look different. And teaching them how that perspective changes. I think those are sometimes really hard for us to grasp. When we say we sat down and we had a meeting and we're committing to technology first, and we asked the person served, what do you think about remote supports? And they're like, oh no, I don't want that. And then we're like, oh, see, they don't want that. Sorry. And it just requires some additional training and support for them.
Yeah, I think speaking to that a little bit is the person-centered approach is if you're going to, if you want to be a tech-first provider, in my opinion, you can't make it about the technology. It has to be about what kind of life, what are your hopes and dreams. This is the person-centered planning approach. And I want to credit Marion's group again, had the opportunity to sit on that for a little bit about how do you integrate technology into the person-centered plan. And so you're making it about the outcome of saying, what kind of life do you want? And, oh, you want to live somewhere else. Well, let's talk about that. And let's engage in the conversation of what that looks like. And then the conversation of, hey, this can help you support, this piece of technology can help support you in achieving that outcome. So, I think that's sometimes what we get into as providers. We start talking about the technology and it becomes a little bit overwhelming, and to Brian's point earlier of keeping it simple and keeping it related to a specific aspect of an outcome, I think is a great point.
Yeah, I mean, I was speaking with a woman yesterday at our advocates meeting, and she told me that we talk about goals in her ISP, and she's got these goals to manage her medications. She wants to date. And she said, I've been asking for a phone and they won't let me have a phone because they're afraid something's going to happen. Like, isn't that a great ISP goal though? Right. So, I mean, these are things that I think we just have to work with people through. So,
And also, like, they're afraid something's going to happen. And that's the thing that we think about all the time. When people are afraid, we need staff there because all these horrible things are going to happen. Well, how many horrible things are really happening? Probably not that many. Everyone talks about they're worried the house is going to burn down. My house has never burned down. I have smoke alarms in case it does. It happens rarely, but it's drastic enough that we think about it all the time. The real thing that we should be worried about, though, that is a real threat, is we don't have enough staff. We don't have enough staff today. We definitely don't have enough staff for anyone on our wait lists. We don't have enough staff for the people that are coming down the pipeline. People with disabilities are outliving their parents for the first time ever in massive amounts. And we have no plan for it because of the staffing that we have. there's not enough people to do it. So when we talk about, here are the things I'm afraid of, what we truly need to be open about and afraid of is we don't have enough staff to do our job the way we've been doing it. And so we're going to use technology to do better, to provide the same level of support we would as if we were in the home. That's the thing that when we're talking about, well, everyone's afraid of these things or they're worried something will happen. Well, how is it going to be if we don't have any staff? And so we're like, well, you don't have any staff, go live alone without technology, without staff. That's when things are going to go wrong.
So as providers, we're feeling all these pressures, right? We've got staff shortages, we've got people who are more complex, we've got persons served who are living longer. So we know kind of where these problems are, and we know that we can feel that our current system isn't always meeting those needs and helping us. So what are some of the ways that technology, in your experience, can feed innovation in service, ways we can think about services different?
Let me jump in and maybe just set the table for our colleagues to kind of knock this down. So some of the things that we have been able to do at the state has really been to listen to feedback from our provider network and make the necessary changes. One of the things that became very clear through the pandemic was the ongoing need to continue to provide services remotely. So you've seen that we've incorporated that through teleservices. We think that is an important part of continuing to care for individuals, not only because it just makes sense, but it's also because what individuals and families are asking for, right? That demand is there. We talked a little bit about STAT this morning, looking at using some telehealth services and expanding eligibility criteria, or expanding services within the waiver to be able to provide like real-time direct telehealth assessments in people's homes or community. It's really cool stuff. And then again, we have implemented a freestanding remote supports service definition, which I think has helped clarify some of this. When it was embedded with assistive technology, we heard a lot of, frankly, complaints from teams about how challenging it was to navigate that service definition. So I don't know if it's the end, but we certainly have a new platform and new language that is helping teams to get connected with person-centered planning.
So there's a lot of, right now we have a lot of systems change going on right now that will help drive innovations. Clearly, you've got selective contracting out there. You heard there's been a lot of discussion about that. Technology is included in that element, whether it's organizational technology such as an EHR or assistive remote technology, enabling technology. That's all part of that system right now. You also have a CMS, as you heard that, evidence-based practices. Well, guess what creates evidence-based practices? A lot of technology and data. So it can provide, it'll start setting up some innovation on a systems level. We also had an event called a pandemic here that, as Jeremy alluded to, started to drive system innovation in and of itself. And it's as providers struggled to connect and communicate, all of a sudden you saw adoption of tablets and systems and everything else like that. And one of the positive side effects of that was observational learning that occurred by individuals that accept services, because all of a sudden we had this technology in the home. So at Keystone, we threw 2,000 tablets. We had iPads right before we'd implemented. And we saw individuals then wanting to get iPads and connect with their families and communicate. And all of a sudden we have these apps-based learning and devices that all of a sudden were driving the conversation because we put in a backbone and an infrastructure around that was leading to more adoption of assistive technology and the thousands of apps that are out there that drive us, that are really interesting to use. So we're seeing some of that. And part of this also comes from, as providers adopt and prepare for selective contracting. We heard some conversation around that. You're talking about medical complexity. You're talking about behavioral complexity. How are we going to address that on a level that you're looking at technology solutions on some of this. We heard the integrated care panel talking about this today, or what are the solutions that work that will drive that providers to adopt that. So we had a conversation about risk management and risk mitigation. And for me, that's on 3 basic levels as an individual that accepts services. What are the devices that they're using? Brian talked about apps, wearables, and those kind of devices that can help someone manage their day themselves and include an element of independence in that area that maybe they didn't previously experience, of teaching them to manage their own health or manage their own systems. And then you have a staff at a DSP level of risk management and education. What systems do you have in place that help a DSP navigate complex decisions? So if a blood sugar is too high on a reading, do they get an alert? Do they get a pop-up? Is there a fall detection system in the home that says, hey, Greg just fell, or is getting out of bed, or a prompting system that helps a DSP navigate difficult choices? We have to give our DSPs better tools and easier tools and design systems that are always at that front interface, at that user interface, at the UI level. And the third level is obviously technology and risk management at an organizational level. Are you capturing data, collecting that data, that's analyzing those trends, developing those trends, and putting it in a place that you say, hey, guess what? We got, look at the fall detection. We got people with individuals that are accepting supports with blood sugar basic, increasing, or diabetes or diagnosis. What are we doing about that? Are there additional steps that we have to put in from a fall detection standpoint? All these things that occur as you get into that, and that starts getting into AI and BI, and I don't know when CI will come along, but we'll have something in those lines. And it's interesting to me. We heard conversations about Epic today. Well, Epic is the largest EHR, I think, probably in the world. And it's got AI integrated to it now. So it literally a doctor can enter a note, and AI is pulling out trends, as Jeremy talked to when he was talking about, the new database that's coming to the state about pulling information trends. So these are things that are coming for providers that will be, unfortunately, ID services are often on the back end, but we have to pay attention to, and how do we quickly get in front of that from an innovative standpoint to adopt these systems that are coming out there on all those levels, from supporting an individual to, as an organization, how are we assessing and addressing risk?
Yeah, and I think what you just said, Greg, is just so, just think about how powerful that really is when you can look at, trends on falling, on blood sugar, on all of these things that can be catastrophic potentially for people. What's that? Having insight into the moment where you can intervene, right, and prevent these very dangerous and also very costly issues to an organization. And so really, not kind of taking a back seat here and, kind of waiting for things to happen. But like you said, having that early adoption, being interested in what that data is telling you so that you can, really take those critical steps to, prevent that trend from continuing, right? That is truly what it boils down to is, it's not just, like you said, the flashy things, the fancy things, the artificial intelligence. It's what is this telling us, and how can we actually use it and make meaning of it? So just don't want to lose the power of the opportunity to protect people and protect organizations.
And the biggest things, I don't really have a whole lot more to add, but I like hearing my own voice. So I'll talk for a second, I guess, is that from an outsider's point of view, I'm a guest here. You guys, your systems and your state and everyone has opened the doors pretty wide, and it is unique. Like, it doesn't, I work primarily out of Ohio. We are very similar. Our doors are open wide, but many states, the doors are shut, locked, barricaded, and say you cannot deliver services using technology. It has to be a person. And so there are people across the country just fighting to get through that door, and yours is wide open. And so how do you leverage, the innovation is to walk through that door. You guys have it available to you. And we talk about what are all the things holding us back. There's very few things here holding y'all back. It's a matter of walking through, taking that opportunity, trying it, and it is painfully simple. I mean, that's the thing. You get a ton of data. You see a lot. We use AI in a lot of different areas, from our assessment, how we assess, to how we deliver services. But it's not that hard. I'm not I don't have a degree or background education in technology. I'm a service provider. That's what I did. But I knew that if I didn't change the way I delivered services, I couldn't keep doing that for the next 10 years. And so I had to figure out, how do I also be a technology provider? And I found people around me and said, I don't know, can you make this do this? And you find someone where they know how to do that and they make it all work. And then I just figure out how to work it for us. But use that. You guys have an opportunity, walk through that door and take advantage of it.
So as providers, sometimes it's easy to get blinders on, and we sort of think about, well, we got to go find a Simply home, and let's just find one that's really a good fit for us. And then we'll set up our remote supports, or we'll set up our smart homes, or we sort of narrowly look at what technologies can bring to the organization. Sometimes we got to think of it about a little broader. So as Brian and Lauren were saying, and the panel is sort of discussing, you got to look at the data that's available to you. And I'm sure there's plenty that you're collecting that, that's a place to start for technology first decision making, right? How can I look at my own organization and look at what I'm collecting, or what do I need to collect in order to influence the gadgets and the gadgets and the different solutions that might be in place. But with that in mind, what are some of the, maybe one or two from each of your perspectives, that one or two most effective things that a provider can leave today with, and go home and go back to their organization and say, all right, how do I get started here? What do I need to do next?
Yeah, I think the thing that you can take away from this is, when you think about all the things that are out there, and there are a lot of different ways to become a technology first agency or to deliver technology based supports. You could be an agency that brings on a remote support provider and they handle that load for you. You could be someone that just deals in assistive technology. What we did is, where we were at, we couldn't find a provider that worked for us. It's kind of like we had to find the right fit for what our organization was, and we couldn't find them. So we did it ourselves. We implemented ourselves, and I truly believe that any agency that delivers in-person supports could very easily deliver technology enabled and remote supports. And so I would say, start thinking about, at your agency level, how do you want to envision yourself? Do you want to contract out and bring someone in? Is it something that you want to do yourself? Because there are a lot of pathways to that. Also be aware that there are plenty of resources out there. I spend a lot of my time talking with groups like this. I'll leave my card. Feel free to call me. I love talking with people because I truly am passionate about what I do here, but also think about what you're already doing with your individuals and how much more you could do if you could leverage them a little more. If you didn't have staff showing up at 7 because there's a med pass, and then they wait around because there's a med pass at 4, what could you do with that staff member between those hours? How many people aren't actually included in the community? They're not getting out of their homes. They don't have meaningful work. They're not doing anything. We are great about integration, and we're kind of terrible still at inclusion, because we envision that staff have to be with someone every time they also leave the house. And so we build in this paywall of a staff member to really be a barrier to inclusion. So we think about, well, staff need to be there because people don't drive. Okay, well then have them drive them there, and then hard stop. What happens after they've driven them there? Well, they have to buy a ticket, or they have to check in, and have to do those things. Okay, well, do they need a staff there for that? Or can they do it on their own? And then if something happens, they have technology where they can get support. We were talking a minute before this, that when we were looking into wearables, we knew about Apple Watch and all the other smart watches. And we thought, well, we're going to find everything else that's out there. There's got to be something better, whatever. But there's not for a lot of it, for most people. You have a device that you can wear on your wrist that's pretty cheap, that can tell you where you're at, make calls, detect falls, in some cases detect seizures, heart rate, oxygen levels, all those things. Think about if you actually use that to say, we want someone to be independent in their community. We have an individual who, he was in his 50s, and he had one-on-one staffing every time he left the house. Because when he left the house, he would run away from the staff that were with him or his family members, and he would either get lost or he would go somewhere he probably shouldn't be. So they had staff there all the time. And it was costly. It was hard to staff. What it meant is he was at his house probably more than he needed to be. And we really got down to it and asked him, we asked him, why do you do that? Why do you, as soon as you get out that door, just take off? You know, if you just stayed with the staff, you could probably do more things. He said, I don't want to be with the staff. I just want to go on a walk alone. And so we thought, okay, well, how do we do that? So we got him some wearable devices, and now he just goes on walks by himself. And after a few weeks, guess what? He fell and broke his arm. This is the guy that broke his arm. Let this happen. 3 weeks ago. Fell and broke his arm. His mom said, see, we need staff there. Staff would have stopped that. Like, no, they wouldn't. Not only would they not have been there, guess what? When he fell, it alerted the staff that he had fallen. They reached out to him. He said he fell and his arm hurt. They called 911. 911 was en route. While they were en route and the staff were on the phone, they said, hey, we're getting another call. I think this is the same guy. Someone in the community also saw him fall. They called 911 too. You know, you think about all these things that the systems you have in place already exist. You already deliver high quality services. You just need to change the way you do it, and not for everybody. For us, it's about 50% of our population we think are good fit. The other 50% will have traditional services. The only way we can serve the other 50% is by reducing the burden that we don't need for those that truly don't need it. So think about what you're doing and find ways to start. Make a plan for, okay, what are you going to do in the next 3 months as an agency to use technology in the way you deliver services? Not what is the new charting software going to be? How are we going to process invoices quicker? How are we going to be better at EVV? But how are we going to use technology to actually deliver services more meaningfully? And then start having those conversations, open it up, get feedback. Just as much as you need a champion on your team, you need what I call the Phyllis factor, because we had a lady on in our team named Phyllis who will come back and tell us why everything doesn't work. She's been with our agency for 42 of the 48 years, managing the same house of 4 ladies, and her staff have an average tenure of 26 years. She knows what she's doing, right? And she is skeptical because she's seen every pilot that has come out. Have someone on your team that's going to point out, you all think this is great and you're all bought in, but let me show you all the holes. So build your team and start doing it as soon as you possibly can, because the longer you wait, the worse things are going to get. It is Friday night, Friday afternoon. Most people are probably thinking, how are we going to staff this weekend, right? Are we covered? Do we have enough staff this weekend? I promise you, if you start using technology where technology fits and where staff don't need to be there, those thoughts will start to go away because you won't need to have those thoughts. So
I'll jump in with a few thoughts. Thank you, Brian, for the user story, right? The user example. We have found at the state, we found those so tremendously helpful to try to bridge the gap between how technology works and where people are in their home and their community. So thank you to anyone in the room that has really helped us with that, because we don't do that. You're the ones that are doing the work. We mentioned champions a few times. I think that if you don't have a champion identified in your organization, that's something that you really want to seriously start to consider within your leadership team. Really identify either somebody that has interest, or if you start to carve that out into a new function within your organization. The other thing, I think there are plenty of opportunities to get involved. There, as we mentioned, there's the technology task force. I believe that Craig and Patrick facilitate another technology, a technology committee. Get involved. We love learning collaboratives. I believe that like-minded agencies can get together once a month and just share ideas with each other. We have a number of providers that like to pick our brains. I think we're on like a quarterly rotation with them, and we just set up an hour and we just talk about what's new in technology, and it's two-way. It's really helpful and informative as we think about what that next policy or next practice is going to be.
And thank you for leading those. I had a group on the last one you were on, and I appreciate your comments and support on that level. I think for us and for me, recommendations, as my colleagues have already alluded to, have a plan. You have to have, at least you got to know where you're going, and you have to publicly state that. You can't say, well, what do you want to do as an organization? And whether it's 3 months, 6 months, a year, those kind of things, you have to provide the executive leadership to have that. That doesn't mean from a cultural basis, you can't create that culture of how do we create this at the ground level, which comes through the person-centered approach. So implementing a bottom-up and a top-down approach to ensure that you have consistency. Whether you bring someone, whether you find that champion and develop that into a role, or whether you're developing that through your internal practices now and developing that, both can be effective. I think the second part about this is I'm an old school guy, so I follow the adage that what gets measured gets managed. And so measure some things, make sure you're tracking it, you're reporting on it. It's like you do on incident reports now in incident management. You're looking at those trends and those analysis on anything that you do. And rather, so this is something that could be a very positive for staff and those things as you say, hey, listen, we have our first implementation today, and celebrate those moments and and it allows staff then to celebrate with you, and you can really promote that. So recently I had an individual that came into and talked to our board about how she uses technology, and it's a chance for her and her team and the DSPs to talk about that and to really be promoted at a high level of the organization. So take advantage of those and try to build that inertia and that momentum as you move forward.
And Jeremy stole mine, which was join the tech task force. Serious, I think one of the things, right, that you can kind of take away from here is, some of this is about expectation setting, right? And we oftentimes think about the things that people need help with, not the things that they're leading with their strengths. What are the things that they can do? What are the gifts that they have? What, how are they contributing? And so I think raising our own expectations, holding the expectation that people can do things, and kind of starting there and not anticipating, well, all of these things are set to fail, and doomed and that sort of thing. Because I think we'll be surprised, the more expectations that we set for folks, they tend to achieve them, and rise to them. And so, just holding that expectation that people can be really successful in adopting and implementing technology in their lives.
How about you guys? What questions do you have for our panel? Comments?
So I have a question for you guys. How many of you are implementing any kind of enabling remote supports technology in your organization? So we got some. And has that been recent, or it's kind of something that, recently you've been doing it? Okay. So small group, but I'd encourage, as was mentioned earlier, talk to those people that just raised their hands. How are they doing it, and how did they get started? And is this something that works? And I think you'll find that there are ways to do this that are fairly straightforward.
Did the heat take you all over? Or is it the Friday afternoons? Happy. All right. Well, we appreciate you sticking around. Thank you to our panel. This was great and thought-provoking. It was an exciting day.